On February 8, 1913, a northern Canadian prospector, trapper, and fur trader named Poole sat down in his cabin on Yukon's Ross River to typewrite a letter to his friend, John Jack Moran, a former inspector of the Northwest Territories and Yukon for Canada's Department of the Interior. Field corresponded with Moran with casual irregularity, sending him occasional letters throughout the first half of the 20th century, some of them separated by decades. These missives were filled with tales of Field's adventures traveling with the so-called Mountain Indians, a mysterious Dene people who roamed throughout the Mackenzie Mountains of Canada's Yukon and Northwest Territories, subsisting almost entirely on moose, mountain sheep, caribou, and black bear. Amid tales of hunting accidents, bloody intertribal feuds, and chilling accounts of medicine man sorcery, Field included descriptions of some of the strange creatures the Mountain Indians believed haunted their alpine abode. In his February 8, 1913 letter, he wrote, "They have tales of enormous animals such as the mammoth, and spiders as large as a full-sized grizzly bear, and long worms that are supposed to be alive today, and nobody can save them from these animals but their doctors. Some of the Indians will tell you they have seen these animals." As we have explored in previous pieces, traditional native belief in living woolly mammoths is surprisingly common across Canada, stretching from the frozen forests of the Northern Territories to the rocky woods of the Canadian Shield. More disturbing and less well known is the fact that the Mountain Indians are not the only First Nations with stories of enormous spiders and giant worms. The alarming concept of giant predatory spiders also appears in the legends of the Dunne-za or Beaver Indians, a Dene people whose historic domain stretches along the northern banks of Peace River in northwestern Alberta. In a 1976 article for the journal Anthropologica, American anthropologist Robin Wrightington wrote that the Dunne-za believed that giant man-eating spiders once roamed the wilderness of North America in ancient times, luring luckless humans to their mountaintop layers by making an alluring whirring sound, which they produced by whirling around a piece of wood attached to a length of spider silk. The creature pounced on those who succumbed to its spidery music, and killed them by sucking out their bodily fluids. Another Dene people with a traditional belief in giant prehistoric spiders are the Gwich'in, whose ancestral domain lies in northern Yukon Territory. In his 1886 French-language book, Indian Traditions of Northwest Canada, French Oblate missionary Father Emile Petitot included a story told to him by a Gwich'in shaman named Lisette Cachoti in January 1870. About an immense spider called Kokale, who made his home in the heavens. The Gwich'in believed that the rainbow was his celestial web, spun with the intention of snaring the morning star, or the planet Venus. Interestingly, the notion of a monstrous aerial spider also appears in the folklore of the Flathead Indians, an interior Salish people who lived far to the south, in northwestern Montana, and in the boundary country of southeastern British Columbia. In his 1865 report on the native tribes inhabiting the US-Canada border between the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific Ocean, Captain Charles William Wilson, a British Army officer who would become a Major General in the Royal Engineers, included a traditional Flathead story about anthropomorphic spiders who lived in the sky, whom he described as large, grim old fellows with grizzled hair and beard, and long horny nails, crooked like the owls. These monsters hunted wolves, deer, enormous dragonflies, and other prey by ensnaring them in their webs and dispatching them with darts. Although tales of giant spiders are relatively scarce in Canadian folklore, stories of colossal worms are unnervingly prevalent and widespread. In an 1899 book, American ethnologist William Edward Nelson wrote that the Western Inuit believed in something called the Tisik-Puck, which term he translated as the Great Worm. This animal, he wrote, which figures in numerous tales, was shaped like an enormous worm or caterpillar. It lived in the days when animals were supposed to have the power of changing their form at will to that of human beings, and in the tales, it is indifferently a worm or a man. Among the carvings in ivory representing this creature were several having the body shaped like a worm, with a human face on the head. Father Emile Petitot included a similar legend in his 1886 book, told to him by a Gwich'in elder, which features a creature called the Nadui, or the Creeping Snake. In this story, two Dene sisters set out on foot along the shores of Yukon's Arctic Ocean, following in the trail of their band, which had left before them. At dusk, they decided to make camp. The elder sister asked her younger sister to spend the night with her in her tent, but the younger sister declined the offer and pitched her own tent some distance away. That night, the elder sister was awoken by a long whistling sound. She got up, Petito wrote in French, and in the moonlight, inspecting the surroundings of the tent, over in the portage leading down to the sea, she saw, lying on the water, a being similar to a large living worm. You could hear it eating and crushing the limbs of a human being. Realizing that she could do nothing for her sister, the victim of this crawling abomination, the girl quietly slipped away and ran through the night. She finally caught up to her band's caravan before dawn and informed her fellow tribesmen of her sister's gruesome fate. Men rushed to the scene, Petito wrote. After a long search, they reached a large tree in whose branches the snake was hiding, but they were unable to kill it. Then an old woman got up, and throwing the small stick with which she twisted the skin she was tanning at the snake, she killed it. He swallowed it, and the stick stopped at the monster's anus, so he died. That's how she got rid of it. Petito's informant went on to relate another story about two brothers who set out on a hunting trip one summer. One night, in the middle of the wilderness, the brothers heard a whistling sound. Suspecting that the noise was the call of a great bear feasting on its prey, of which they might avail themselves, they decided to investigate. They left their tent and headed down a game trail in the direction of the strange sound, their path illuminated by the light of the moon. After walking some distance, the brothers came upon something large and long, which sprawled across the game trail. It was beautiful, Petito wrote. So beautiful that once you saw it, you couldn't take your eyes off it. They threw him a large bone, the rump of a ruminant. The crawling gnaw swallowed it. The bone entered his anus, stopped there, and the monster died. In a footnote, Petito marveled at this unusual legend, which he apparently interpreted as a cultural memory of a time when giant serpents must have inhabited the northern wilderness, writing, "To think that these Hyperboreans have such vivid memories of the great snakes of the python and boa genera, and that they are even aware of the hypnotism that these Ophidians exert on their victims, when there is not the smallest legless lizard in the whole of North America beyond 54 degrees latitude." Legends of giant worms endured further to the east, on the shores of the Northwest Territories' Great Bear Lake. In his 1931 treatise on the ethnography of the Sato-Dene, a branch of the North Slavey, or Hare tribe, which lived along the western shores of this colossal body of water, American anthropologist Cornelius B. Osgood described a horrific animal that was said to haunt an island in the lake. Myths about fabulous monsters hold a considerable place among the stories of the Sato-Dene, he wrote. A big eddy below Good Hope is said to be caused by the mouthings of a whale-like monster, whose tail forms part of the hills to the east of that place. There are several groups of islands on Great Bear Lake which the natives fear. One is said to contain burning sulfur and large natural caves of limestone. A Sato-Dene informant said that there once lived on this island a great worm, which devoured people passing by. The customary Indian canoe route to the McVicker Bay Portage lies behind this island, but one year, a group of Indians decided to pass in front. Suddenly, all the canoes except one, which had been unable to keep up, were engulfed in a whirlpool and disappeared. This was assumed to be the action of the worm. Far to the southeast, in the forests of southern Ontario, Quebec, and upstate New York, the nations of the Iroquois Confederacy have traditional stories about a giant worm that haunted the Northwoods. In the 1918 book, Seneca Fiction, Legends and Myths, American folklorist Jeremiah Curtin and Tuscarora ethnographer John Napoleon Brinton Hewitt included a story about a boy who encountered such a creature while hunting in the forest. While he was looking around for birds, they wrote, he noticed on the limb of a tree a large many-colored worm. He thought it very beautiful, and he watched it for some time. The next day, he went into the woods again, thinking all the time of the worm and wondering whether it still would be there. When he came to the tree, he saw the worm on the branch, but in another place. The boy had a string of birds which he had killed that morning. Tearing off a small bit of flesh of one and fastening it to a stick, he tried to feed the worm. It ate a little, and the boy was greatly amused. The following day, the boy again found the worm and fed it. The worm always remained near the place where he had first discovered it. Each day, the worm ate a little more in larger proportions. After a while, the boy gave it a whole bird at a time. Then soon 2 birds, feathers and all. The worm had now become very large, too heavy for the limb of the tree on which it had been staying, so it fell to the ground. It never looked for food, but seemed to wait for the boy to bring it. The folklorist went on to explain how the boy took his friends to see the worm one day, and entertained them by feeding it birds. At every turn, they wrote, it seemed to change color and grow more beautiful. The boys were delighted to throw birds at the worm, that they might see it snatch and eat them. The boys then made a regular practice of bringing the worm birds and rabbits to eat. The worm grew very rapidly, the folklorist wrote, became very long and thick, a huge monster. The boys never told their parents or relations about the worm, for they were afraid of losing their sport. They would go early every morning to see the worm. The creature swallowed everything that came within its reach. One day, while the boys were throwing the worm food, they began to wrestle, and in the excitement, the youngest boy was thrown near the creature. In an instant, the boy was swallowed. At this, the rest of the boys were terribly frightened. Fearful of the repercussions, the boys pleaded ignorance when the parents of the missing child inquired into their friend's whereabouts, claiming they had no idea what had happened to him. After this, Curtin and Hewitt continued, the boys pushed 2 or 3 others of their number near the worm, which devoured them too. It had become very large and ferocious, and ruled the boys by a spell. One day, they found that the worm had killed and eaten a deer. Thereupon, they were seized with great fear, for the creature had grown so immense, and they ran away without having their usual sport. The following morning, the folklorist explained, the boys awoke with the rest of their band to find that their palisaded village on a hill was completely encircled by the immense worm. In an effort to escape the monster, a number of villagers headed into what seemed to be an opening, inadvertently walking directly into the monster's mouth, whereupon they were swallowed. The terrified survivors began burning tobacco and praying to Gwich'in, the Iroquois god of war, asking him to deliver them from their monstrous besieger. In response, a black storm cloud glided over top of the village, issuing bolts of lightning. Several of the bolts struck the worm, rending it to pieces. The monster's smoking remains rolled down a hillside and into a valley below, where they dissolved into water and formed a lake.